it's like you mentioned this Leo Borealis, where he will just make small concessions on certain points. So I did put these in here. I don't know if there are more labels that I should have added, but I mean, at least in Homo Deus, he does concede the idea that let's say basically people in the past. This is like the label on the right here, that people in the past, because of natural selection pressures, would have been basically stronger and smarter than you are. Like they the regular person you would have met 200 years ago, 500 years ago, would likely have been much more functional than you, and stronger. Which is, I mean, you can contrast that with someone like the new atheist crowd, or someone like Sam Harris, where he basically says that no, I mean, people from 200 years ago were just retards. They didn't understand anything, and they were
Yeah,
completely.
essentially he kind of has to do that because he does have some chapters there on the brutishness and high attrition rates, and morons will get themselves killed. If there aren't cars around, there will be lions around somewhere, and well, they will do stupid shit and get themselves killed. So the idea that people in the past were on average smarter and stronger than you, yes, that's true, but that's only because the lower 30 to 50% of the normal distribution scale didn't make it past to adulthood, or at least it was rare. So by sheer rate of attrition, you get say a higher lowest level of everyone who's like 20.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
we'll just look through some of these other ones here. Let's go from the top. The modern life may not actually be better than traditional life. This is something he concedes when he talks about utilitarianism and the development. Is that
I think
the amount of.
I might have a passage from *Sapiens* about that, if you want me to read it.
Yeah, do it.
I'm going to bring it up because it's basically like half a page. Hang on. Share screen. And here we go. The pursuit of an easier life resulted in much hardship, and not for the last time. It happens to us today. How many young college graduates have taken demanding jobs in high-powered firms, vowing that they will work hard to earn money that will enable them to retire and pursue their real interests when they are 35. But by the time they reach that age, they have large mortgages, children to school, houses in the suburbs that necessitate at least 2 cars per family, and a sense that life is not worth living without really good wine and expensive holidays abroad. What are they supposed to do? Go back to digging up roots? No, they double their efforts and keep slaving away. One of history's few iron laws is that luxuries tend to become necessities and to spawn new obligations. Once people get used to a certain luxury, they take it for granted. Then they begin to count on it. Finally, they reach a point where they can't live without it. Let's take another familiar example from our own time. Over the last few decades, we have invented countless time-saving devices that are supposed to make life more relaxed. Washing machines, vacuum cleaners, dishwashers, telephones, mobile phones, computers, emails. Previously, it took a lot of work to write a letter, address and stamp an envelope, and take it to the mailbox. It took days or weeks, maybe even months to get a reply. Nowadays, I can dash off an email, send it halfway around the globe, and, if my addressee is online, receive a reply a minute later. I've saved all that trouble and time, but do I live a more relaxed life? Sadly not. That's it. He goes further on, but it's pretty much the same point.
I have a similar quote. I don't know if you can bring up the Google Doc there and you find the quote that's named on happiness and energy.
Let's see here.
So it's a little bit shorter, but it does go into the same territory.
On happiness and energy.
Interesting to compare notes. So it's under, say, the human agenda, the right to happiness, and then there we go. So let's say,
even if we are somewhat happier than our ancestors, the increase in our well-being is far less than we might have expected. In the Stone Age, the average human had at his or her disposal about 4,000 calories of energy per day. This included not only food, but also the energy invested in preparing tools, clothing, art, and campfires. Today, Americans use on average 228 calories of energy per person per day to feed not only their stomachs, but also their cars, computers, refrigerators, and televisions. The average American thus uses 60 times more energy than the average Stone Age hunter-gatherer. Is the average American 60 times happier? We may well be skeptical about such rosy views.
So a lot of the stuff that he brings up in that chapter, it could be like Ted Kaczynski writing it, like that type of stuff, but he ends up with, like you said, the completely opposite conclusion that the show must go on. Basically, we have to keep pushing for more pleasure, basically constantly stimulating, making more money, increasing GDP, and so on. So it's a very bizarre combo where it's like these counterpoints are acknowledged, but ultimately we're just going to keep going in the direction we're already going.
Yeah, we're just going to lean hard on techno-futurism, and then we're going to create a servant class of people and somehow, work it out.
Yeah. Jeez. What a nut.
So,
There's
I did put in
no,
one.
I was just going to go to the next quote. You do it.
Yeah, let's see. Superior organization is what makes humans better than animals. Because in Homo Deus, he has like a wholehearted endorsement of elite theory. Actually, if you bring up the quote sheet again, there is basically it goes under, say, the human spark, and the quote is called cooperation/elite theory.
Okay,
So
I'll bring it up.
This is a sort of similar point that you can find in the a lot of the stuff Academic Agent has covered and in the Populist Delusion and so on. But it's interesting to get it confirmed from the multiple sources.
History provides ample evidence for the crucial importance of large-scale cooperation. Victory almost invariably went to those who cooperated better, not only in struggles between Homo sapiens and other animals, but also in conflicts between different human groups. Thus, Rome conquered Greece not because the Romans had larger brains or better tool-making techniques, but because they were able to cooperate more effectively. Throughout history, disciplined armies easily routed disorganized hordes, and unified elite dominated the disorderly masses. In 1914, for example, 3 million Russian noblemen, officials, and business people lorded it over 180 million peasants and workers. The Russian elite knew how to cooperate in defense of its common interest, whereas the 180 million commoners were incapable of effective mobilization. Indeed, much of the elite's efforts focused on ensuring that the 180 million people at the bottom would never learn to cooperate. In order to mount a revolution, numbers are never enough. Revolutions are usually made by small networks of agitators rather than by the masses. If you want to launch a revolution, don't ask yourself, how many people support my ideas? Instead, ask yourself, how many of my supporters are capable of effective collaboration? The Russian Revolution finally erupted not when 180 million peasants rose against the Tsar, but rather when a handful of communists placed themselves at the right place and the right time. In 1917, at a time when the Russian upper and middle classes numbered at least 3 million people, the Communist Party had just 23,000 members. I'm not sure what happens there. The communists nevertheless gained control of the vast Russian Empire because they organized themselves well. When authority in Russia slipped from the decrepit hands of the Tsar and the equally shaky hands of the Kerensky's provisional government, the communists seized it with alacrity, gripping the reins of power like a bulldog locking its jaws on a bone.
And then
That is a stock elite theory.
The issue with reading Harari is that he, in making his windling arguments, he on occasion seems to be based, but then he comes to the end of his conclusion and it's not based at all.
Yeah, I'm probably sure that on the next page his point is that, the communist revolution was good or something, right? So
no, the sort of the point of the chapter is actually a lot more insidious than that. It's sort of just breaking down humanism, basically, or breaking down the idea that individuals have value. because he says that like the reason that human beings are valuable is because they can cooperate, and that's sort of it. There's no inherent value to the actual individual in terms of strength or intelligence or creativity and so on. It's all about the kind of shared story and the shared cooperation and the network, in a sense. That's what actually is valuable, not the individual. That's the point of the chapter.
Right. And I mean, he's correct. But
Yeah, I
the
don't
problem is
disagree.
that his conclusion is that he's the one who wants to be part of the elite that controls the rest of the world, right?
Yeah, the conclusion is eating the bugs and living in the pod, so it
Exactly.
doesn't really matter. Let's see. Let's go through these. I don't have specific quotes for all of them because the quotes would just be way too long. But the humanism is a religion of feels. It's a sort of funny point where he does go through multiple chapters trying to break down humanism and liberalism. Something I might get more into later, but you'll see this in a lot of these talks that he does as well, where he goes through this the sort of like standard talking points where he basically says that ethics basically in humanism is all about how people feel. If you look at something like gay marriage, it's something that used to be unpermissible because it's from a higher commandment. It was basically seen as immoral, but now it's all about like the feelings of the participants, and if both people think it's okay, then it's okay, and that's how morality works. And he says basically the government works by democracy, which is really just how the most people feel at any given moment.
Yes.
Art in the modern world is about how people feel, like the sort of modern and postmodern art. If I say something is art, if I feel like it's art, then it's art. Whether it's like the urinal with the titles on it, or this kind of like pig's head on a tank or something. I mean, it's art is whatever I feel like. I mean, the economy is sort of arranged the same way. It's really the customer is always right. That it's sort of the feelings of the customer that get to determine what gets produced and what doesn't get produced. That is, it's kind of how that works. And education, where it's like the central goal of education. I mean, you'll see this if you talk to teachers. They want to teach people to think for themselves. In a sense, to kind of like they think on behalf of their own feelings. So I mean, it is.
So not only doesn't he understand history, he doesn't understand economics either. But I think he has a quote here. Let me see if I can find it in *Sapiens*. It's when he goes on and about the. I think it's quite telling. Let's see. Okay, here I have it.
What is the quote? What is he talking about?
Yet none of these things exists outside the stories that people invent and tell one another. There are no gods in the universe, no nations, no money, no human rights, no laws, and no justice outside the common imagination of human beings. I think that is kind of telling where he's coming from all
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, and I agree. And humanism is a sort of difficult topic to tackle, where it's like no matter what sources I consult, I always find it difficult to get good definition of what humanism actually is. I mean, for me, I tie it into basically Enlightenment values, and especially in the post World War II era, to human rights and human potentials. But I mean, of course, to Steelman, the humanist, they would, of course, say that the human being has a reason and has like an actual individual reasoning capability. And that's the reason why democracy is valid, or the liberal economics is valid, because they can actually make rational decisions. And it's not just if it's all the feely feels, then it's just completely pointless. But I just think it's funny to see him go at it, because this is going to hit. It hits a lot of the new atheists in the balls, basically, because they will be making the argument that religion is all about feels. It's all about your feelings, and you ignore the facts. But he just kind of turns that around and says that no, actually, like your system is really that system that's about feels. Religion is actually about like metaphysics and divine commandments that needs to be interpreted and lived by.
Then of course he turns around and says that it's all bunk, because he is who he is, and
Yeah, like you said, I mean, he thinks that it's fiction anyway, so it's not anymore like none of these are more valuable to him. He doesn't think that human rights are
yeah,
more
no,
valuable
it's not a value judgment. It's more of as he see it, what do you call it, a rational. analysis of the situation.
Certainly. So, I mean, the last quote, I mean, you also touched on that in your quote, Leo Borealis, with the humanity cannot survive without useful fictions. And I mean, whether this is based or not, because I don't know, but I think it has kind of the same energy of the noble lie of Plato, and that's why I felt like it's like partially, it's just a little bit based. I don't know how you feel about that.
In Sapiens, I think that's further on in your quote, Leo, where he basically says that, you know, when push comes to shove, sorry, something like the UN isn't real. It's all about, you know, actual power. Everything else is just fiction.
Yeah. He goes into that. It's one of those little small fig leaves. It's like a bit of a throwaway line.
Yeah.
And then he turns it again around to why we need the UN, more or less.
Yeah, it's very strange that like a minute later he goes back into, oh yeah, but the UN is good. So
Yeah. Like let's see here. Quote: No one was lying when, in 2011, the United Nations demanded that the Libyan government respect the human rights of its citizens, even though the UN, Libya, and human rights are all figment of our further imaginations.
So you heard it here first. Harari said human rights aren't real.
Yeah. Then in the next chapter, of course, he turns this argument
Yeah.
on its head.
He does.
Not really that human rights aren't real, but why the UN as an organization is a good thing, and we should do this and that and so forth. Again, you can't, euthanize half of humanity with one still believing in, human rights. So yeah.
So yeah, he's right for the wrong reasons. But I
Yeah,
think that's
he does that a
That
lot.
sums him up very well. Yeah.